Welcome into the Lettermen Lounge, ladies and gentlemen. Mick Walker will be joining me shortly. Just wanted to hop in real quick and let you know that we recorded the show, and then minutes after we finished recording, five-star quarterback Jared Curtis announced that he will not be visiting this week because of a scheduling conflict with the game that he has. We did talk about Curtis's visit in this episode, but we weren't going to re-record just because one visitor was canceled. It's still a pretty loaded show. Just wanted to let you know there is a section of talk about Jared Curtis. He will no longer be visiting Ohio State, but that was announced after we recorded. You probably already knew that because you've been at lettermenrow.com. If you haven't, go to lettermenrow.com right now. We've got full coverage. Mick Walker and Alex Gleitman have full coverage of what the Buckeyes are expecting in the horseshoe on Saturday as it pertains to recruits, and we'll have full coverage of the team side as well. Thanks. Welcome back into the Lettermen Lounge, ladies and gentlemen, for another edition of the Lettermen Lounge. It's also the Lettermen Row podcast feed. If you're getting this, you're subscribed to either one of them. It's Mick Walker, it's Spencer Holbrook, and today's show is brought to you by 5-Star Fans. The thrill, the heartbreak, the pride. Being a fan is a wild ride. With 5-Star Fans, you can finally get in the game like you have never before. 5-Star Fans is the place where fiercely loyal fans can directly reward their favorite players. For a limited time, 5-Star Fans is giving you $5 to send to your favorite player. Visit 5-starfans.com today. Send $5 to your favorite player. Cool little thing that they're doing over there, and I really like what the product is. Mick, how you doing, man?
Good, Spencer. Yeah, I like to read. For any of you guys that don't know 5-Star Fans, I know they're Columbus-based. I don't know if there's Ohio State alumni or Ohio State people involved, but I believe they are Columbus-based at least. So that's a cool another NIL opportunity. But yeah, man, I'm hopefully I think I got a little more sleep than you did because you were up late last night with all the Steph McLaughlin news, which you can find in the other video on the YouTube channel. But we were here to talk recruiting this morning.
Yeah, man. So it's been a week between Zahir Mathis decommitting from Ohio State and Seth McLaughlin now being out for the season. From all reports and the reporting that we've done at Lettermen Row. Not a lot of great news right now, other than the fact that Ohio State is hosting a top 5 matchup in the horseshoe on Saturday and hosting quite a few recruits. So, look, there's a lot of fallout from the McLaughlin news. That's over at lettermenrow.com. This is a recruiting show. There's fallout from Zahir Mathis decommitting. It's not something that was unexpected, though, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on it here on this show. There's a lot of visitors coming in. We're going to get to what's next for Ohio State rather than what's not in the class anymore for Ohio State. And, Mick, I'm going to start it off. Listen, I'll be transparent as I can with everybody. As somebody who is so dialed into team stuff and worried about what's going on the field with the 2024 Buckeyes, this is probably the least I've known about recruiting in a while. So I'm here to play point guard. You can call me CP3. You can call me SH5, I guess, because that's my number throughout my playing career. Whatever you want to call me, just don't call me the recruiting guy. I'm here to facilitate and distribute the basketball to Mick so he can talk about football recruiting. And that's what I'm going to do. So, Mick, I'm going to start it off here. The Buckeyes have an official visitor this weekend for the Indiana game. It's supposed to be cold, blustery, windy. I hope that official visitor isn't from the South, but if he is, he's going to get a good taste of what Northern football looks like. What information do you have on a pretty pivotal official visit here for the Buckeyes this week?
Well, sadly, Spencer, he is from the South. He's from Cartersville, Georgia, and that would be 3-star Cincinnati cornerback commit Jordan Woods. He visited for the Nebraska game, spoke really highly of the Ohio State. Tim Walton of the trip afterwards. A couple weeks later, Ohio State offered him. And he is the third cornerback that Ohio State wants. He's not an Naeem Offord replacement. There are guys there looking if Naeem Offord does flip to a Florida, Oregon, or Auburn, one of those 3 schools that he's heavily considering. But Jordan Woods is the third cornerback. He's 6'4", 170 pounds. He runs really well. He has elite track numbers in triple jump and high jump, and he will be on an official visit this weekend. And I think you'll see Ohio State push to flip him from the Bearcats. Steve Wiltfong, On3 vice president recruiting and transfer portal, also reported on I believe it was Tuesday that there could be a second official visitor. They are looking at some other defensive backs to replace Naeem Offord if that were to go that way, and that could be one. They also could be looking at more defensive linemen. I don't have a lot of intel on the second official visitor, but we know Jordan Woods is coming in. We reported that when it was happening, and I feel good about Ohio State. Would not be surprised if me or Alex Gleitman start moving the On3 RPM machine after the visit for Jordan Woods.
So is this a situation where if the Buckeyes push, this thing's likely to happen, and if they don't, then maybe you'll see it cool a little bit? Because that's kind of the read that we're getting here.
I would say so. He did visit Florida last weekend. The Gators didn't offer. I think there are some bigger schools after Ohio State offers and after you kind of put the senior tape on with his measurables that have started to look around. But I think if Ohio State pushes, they can probably get him in the fold this weekend. He admitted to Steve and he's admitted to myself and other people that the Ohio State offer was big. Obviously, Cincinnati's a good program. Kerry Combs is the cornerbacks coach down there, former Ohio State assistant. But it seems like Ohio State has everything it needs to kind of push and get this one flipped into the class to have that third cornerback they've wanted for a couple months now.
Hey, and you know what? For everything that's been said about Kerry Combs during that second stint at Ohio State, it didn't go the way anybody had hoped or planned. Man's got an eye for talent, so he has him committed in the class right now, and now Woods considering the Buckeyes. That's a good update there, Mick, and I think that's one that Ohio State fans can kind of sink their teeth into because a good flip target at the end of the cycle is always a good thing, especially when you've got somebody who's on the fence about whether they're actually going to stick with a commitment already in the class. Let's move on. There's a lot going on this offensive side of the ball this weekend. We got quarterbacks, we've got different offensive players. Let's go with signal callers. The most important position on the field, most important position in college football. What are you hearing about quarterbacks as it relates to this Ohio State-Indiana game? That doesn't mean you're going to talk about Curtis Rourke versus Will Howard.
Yeah, we won't talk about the former Bobcat, but the number one quarterback and the number one 2026 quarterback in the On3 industry rankings, Jared Curtis from Nashville Christian down in Nashville, Tennessee. He'll be making, I believe, it'll be one of either probably his first or second. He visited, I believe, in the offseason. And at one point, it looked like Ohio State was really trending before the whole Bill O'Brien, Corey Dennis, Chip Kelly transition happened. I feel like Ohio State really had the momentum there. The Buckeyes team kind of fell back in the pack with Chip Kelly got hired. It just was a thing that Jared already had relationships with other schools. He ultimately committed to Georgia, but then backed off his commitment a few weeks ago in October. He's set up a ton of visits. I believe he was back at Georgia last weekend. He's going to be at Ole Miss for the Egg Bowl. He's going to be at Alabama for the Iron Bowl, but he will be on Columbus this weekend for the Indiana game. And he's, like I said, the number one quarterback in the On3 industry rankings. Aside from that, there'll be two other top 25 quarterbacks in the On3 industry rankings in the 2026 class on campus. Gavin Sidwar out of LaSalle College in Pennsylvania. He's a guy that was committed to Rutgers since the summer, backed off his commitment in October. And I think Ohio State really likes him. They have one of his teammates coming on. They're watching him. And he could be a guy, maybe it's a camp, maybe it's a spring throwing session that could work his way into this 26 spot. The other guy is probably the top in-state signal caller, Nathan Bernard from Ashland, Ohio. Interestingly enough, Ryan Day actually got to see Nathan Bernard in person when Ashland took on St. Francis de Sales and his son RJ Day a couple weeks ago in the state playoffs. I believe Nathan had 3 total touchdowns and 150 rushing yards, 150 passing yards. A good all-around day because that's kind of what he is a big dual threat. I think Ohio State wants to see more there, but originally I don't think there was a lot of talk and a lot of feeling from the Bernard family to even visit this fall. So the fact that they have made the plans and decided to move up and will visit Ohio State, I think is a good sign for positive momentum in that recruitment. And those are Sidwar and Bernard are a couple of names Ohio State's trying to evaluate in this process. And Curtis is obviously a guy that they have at the top, if not near the top of the board, because he's one of the top signal callers in 26.
So it's interesting because there's a lot of these 2026 quarterbacks already committed. Ohio State obviously has a 2025 quarterback committed in 5-star, Tavian St. Clair. Do you think that affects the way that the Buckeyes try to operate here in 2026? Or do you think that, it's still wise for them to just go straight at Jared Curtis and then view everything else as almost like a backup plan? Because Curtis is the number one guy.
Yeah, I think they'll go as heavily as they can at Curtis. Oregon's another school that's trending in that recruitment. And I think a large part, it seems like NIL is starting to become more of a factor for Jared Curtis. And I don't know, like you said, with Tavian St. Clair in the fold in 25 and how much they like Brady Edmonds, the Huntington Beach, California quarterback in 2027. They lead for him on the On3 RPM recruiting prediction machine. He'll likely visit again for the Michigan game since his sophomore season's over. And he is someone that Ohio State, I think, is willing to take the commitment of and even could take the commitment of here in the next coming months when he decides to make a commitment because he's already visited most of his top schools. But with 26, I think they're kind of evaluating, do you go all in on a Jared Curtis? Do you kind of take a guy that has a little more upside, more of like a Lincoln Keenholz type of guy that has a ton of athletic profile, a lot of traits, and maybe you can develop into the sandwich in between Tavian and potentially Brady Edmonds in 2027?
That would probably be like a Nathan Bernard, right?
Yeah, I think the Nathan Bernard posted the picture of Will Howard when he announced he was visiting on X, and I think that's an apt comparison. They're both around 6'6", 6'5", athletic guys that can move. I think he's going to be out. I'd have to double check. I know his mom is a volleyball coach up near the Ashland area. She has an athletic background. She has also pushed Nathan to continue to do track, and I believe he's about a 6-foot high jumper. So at 6'6" to be a 6-foot high jumper is pretty impressive. He's got really good athletic traits. But again, it's just I think there's some things Ohio State wants to see from him. I know Chip Kelly wouldn't watch him in the spring. I was there that day actually. It wasn't the best day to throw, and it was kind of a up and down workout for Nathan. But like I said, there were some plans because Ohio State had an offer. Ohio State hadn't shown a ton of interest for the Bernard family to not visit Ohio State at all this season. Now that he's doing that, I think we could see some positive momentum when it comes to just more of a relationship, more interest in the in-state guy.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's a good update. There's options at quarterback. I think the Buckeyes are probably doing a good job of keeping some options open. Let's move on here. 2026, man, there's quite a lot of talent coming in in this class in 2020. The 2026 class, easy for me to say, for this Indiana game. I want to start in the trenches because everyone wants to talk about the trenches, Mick, and not just because it's in the news right now. A big visitor this weekend is 4-star Fort Pierce, Florida, Vero Beach offensive tackle Micah Smith, 6'5.5", 300 pounds. Seems to really connect with Justin Fry. Obviously, coming up from Florida for a visit, that's a big deal. What do you know about Micah Smith, and what do you know about this recruitment?
Yeah, it might be one of the top in-state or out-of-state offensive lineman targets for Ohio State in 2026 class. Camped at Ohio State in the summer of, I guess it would have been 2023 at this point. Earned the offer, visited again for the Penn State game last season, then visited in the spring, came back this summer. So this will be visit number 5 for Micah Smith to Ohio State. Obviously, his teammate is TJ Alford, a linebacker commit in the 25 class, who Ohio State is working very hard to keep in the fold again with Miami trying to flip him right now. But I think Ohio State is very high on the list for Micah Smith. I believe they lead on the on-3 RPM again. They're another guy that they lead for. I think it was a very smart move for him and Ohio State to move it up to this weekend. He was originally wanting to visit for the Michigan game. And we'll talk about it. I believe we'll have maybe you or Steve Wilfon come on and talk about that guest list next week. It's pretty darn loaded. So having him being able to be the only really offered offensive line target on campus this weekend that we know about is big for Justin Fry and Ohio State to kind of get the positive momentum, because as you can figure, some of these in-state schools and SEC schools will continue to try and work at him as we get into the offseason and they start catching up and going after these 26 guys.
So it's interesting because as of right now, it doesn't look like the 2026 in-state guys are on campus. I think those guys, though, from what I know about these recruitments and the in-state guys, I do try to keep a little bit more tabs on just because, I like Ohio high school football. It seems like all of those guys kind of know their priorities for Ohio State in this class. Like it's not something Ohio State has to continue to hammer at with these guys, but to have one out-of-state offensive lineman in this weekend really sets a precedent and shows a guy like Micah Smith, like you are the priority. Do you get the sense that is what Ohio State is doing? Are they being intentional by only bringing him in and not having anybody else on campus?
I believe so. There's going to be more out-of-state offensive linemen that visit next week. Felix Ojo is a guy that I really like from Texas that'll be up for the Michigan game. But I also I believe we've already confirmed with Sam Greer that he'll be back, the Archbishop Hoban offensive tackle, the 4-star guy. I think he's one of the better guys in state. Max Riley, I believe, will probably make the decision to visit. I know it's something the Riley family's talking about, so he could be back on campus. Will Conroy, I believe, will be at USC that weekend when they take on Notre Dame, so he won't be back down. But I do believe Adam Guthrie will be back. So those are the 4 in-state offensive linemen. They'll all be back down. It's a lot different when you have the 2-hour to hour-and-a-half drive to Columbus, and you can make that trip multiple times. But like you said, for an out-of-state guy to fly in to spend the weekend in Columbus, like Micah Smith is doing, it's very important. And I think, like you said, it's intentional for Ohio State to, hey, come in. We're going to get you one-on-one time with Justin Fry, Mike Solini, that entire offensive line room to kind of build this relationship and hopefully get him in as a guy that could be a class leader, because he's a guy that participates in some off-season 7-on-7 stuff for fun as a tight end and as a mobile guy. He enjoys getting out there and kind of being on social media. So it'd be good to have him in the fold early to be able to lead the class.
Did you say tight end?
Yeah, if you go to I believe it was tight end. There's a lot of these offensive tackles that play competitive 7-on-7, just kind of mess around. A lot of these 7-on-7 teams at this point fly guys in. So if you go to his on-3 profile, the picture that we used for the Intel story yesterday, that when we reported his visit, is actually, I believe, from a 7-on-7 event. He's wearing an Ohio State hat. But yeah, it was good time to report that news yesterday. We had about 3 comments asking if he could play this weekend after the news last night. So obviously Ohio State fans are really interested in offensive line recruiting right now, especially after some of the news that we've had over the past couple of days.
All right, let's talk defense. Defense wins championships. Championship teams win defensive recruitments. What do you got? I think it's what is it? It's a safety week, right? We can call it a safety-driven recruiting weekend, like Jim Knowles likes to say. It's a safety-driven defense. We can call this a safety-driven recruiting weekend.
I would. It's going to be a big weekend for Matt Guerreri, Garen Duhart, Michael Hunter, a couple of the other guys that help with the defensive back recruiting, even Tim Walton, who's going to have his hand in a lot of this. You got the number one safety in the on-3 industry rankings, Blaine Bradford out of Baton Rouge Catholic, out right there in LSU's backyard, but Ohio State offered this summer. I believe they're in his top 5 that he announced, whether it was a month or a couple months back. And they're really trying to push here. I don't know how it's rated, how it's going to end up. His brother's committed to LSU, like I said, right in Baton Rouge. But getting him back up for a game visit, especially this game when it's the Indiana game, where they can spend some more time with him, get a little bit more time out, because there won't be as many guys as the Michigan game. That's a big one. Zadie McDonald, Ohio State loves their New Jersey defensive backs. You got TJ McClain, Jaden Bonsu, there's Ronnie Hickman. I know I'm missing a couple guys. You got Deshaun Stewart in this 25 class. Zadie McDonald's is going to be one of their next Jersey targets at defensive back. He's somebody they offered a couple months ago. He's a 3-star guy, but they really like him. Number 44 safety, I believe, in the on-3 industry rankings. And then the 2 other ones was Gavin Sidwar's teammate Joey O'Brien. Ohio State has not offered. I was talking to Kyle Kelly from our Notre Dame site. He thinks it's kind of a Notre Dame Penn State battle, but since he said it was a Notre Dame guy, he thought he would also be an Ohio State guy. He's a big-time 2-way athlete. If you turn on Gavin Sidwar's highlight plays for this season, you're going to see a lot of number 6 playing wide receiver, and that's Joey O'Brien. He's a 6'4", I believe 180, 190-pound safety prospect that Ohio State likes and probably will offer this weekend considering his other offer sheet. And then the final guy to kind of make a note of when it comes to safety is Jet Washington out of Bishop Gorman. Ohio State offered in September. Ohio State has recruited the Bishop Gorman out in Las Vegas pretty heavily since Urban Meyer came in. You got guys like Haskell Garrett, Tate Martell, other guys that have been through there that went to Bishop Gorman. He's the nephew of Kobe Bryant, the late Kobe Bryant, the basketball player. I think he's a dual sport recruitment for some folks. He's going to have the opportunity at some schools to play, but Ohio State likes him at safety, and he'll be in. The other defensive back, could be a safety, could be a corner, in state is Jacob Witherspoon from Avon, Ohio. He's visited twice. Very well could come back for the Michigan game. Ohio State leads on 3 RPM for him. And he and Albert Hill from Archbishop Hoban could be in a battle to be the first defensive commit for Ohio State in the 26th class.
Sounds like a loaded defensive back visitors week. Blaine Bradford is very interesting to me. That is like Ohio State does not traditionally like go into that territory. And now like you look at the on 3 RPM, not only is it a St. Francis Academy guy, Jira Edwards, I think I'm saying that name correctly if I'm not.
Jira
Edwards. Okay. Number 3 safety in the country from Maryland, which Ohio State, traditionally does well recruiting. They're leading in that recruitment according to the RPM. I watched Braylon Womack this summer from way down in the heart of the South in Brandon, Mississippi, and he came up to Ohio State and he was awesome and he earned an Ohio State offer. That guy loves Ohio State, and I'm not saying that like Ohio State's going to win that recruitment, but it's very interesting that he is a big fan of Ohio State. And then now a kid from Baton Rouge coming up, it is apparent that Sam Petito has his fingers all over this 2026 recruiting strategy. Like they are trying to get down into the South and get some of these guys who are in LSU strongholds or Alabama strongholds. Like they're not backing down. And if you're an Ohio State fan, that's got to be music to your ears because you've traditionally seen Ohio State almost stay away from that, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama area. And they're going right down there and they're not being afraid of anything right now.
Yeah, it's big time. I think both Jira and Braylon will be back for the Michigan game. They both talked about that for a while. They'll be in next weekend. The funny story about Blaine Bradford is I believe it was the last camp day of the summer. All the attention with defensive back was on Jordan Thomas, the Bergen Catholic standout who visited for the Purdue game, I believe. He was the talk. He was the guy we were getting pictures of. After the camp, somebody came up to me from Ohio State and said, "Hey, we had Blaine Bradford on campus." And I go, I don't know who Blaine Bradford is because I had not gone full deep into the 26 rankings. We were in official visit season. And they go, Mick, that's somebody you should know. So I obviously went to look it up, and we quickly found out that he is one of the best safeties in the country. Ohio State offered him. And again, like you said, Sam Petito, former Alabama assistant, guy that has Louisiana ties, helping with Jakeem Stewart. But I believe also if you look at Derek Cooper, the running back target, number one running back in the On3 industry rankings, if you go to his visit photos, the 4 that he put out was a picture including with him and his mom and Sam Petito. So just to kind of show you the relationships, the ties that Sam Petito has to the South and why it's a big weekend, like you said, with all these Southern or these out-of-state defensive backs coming up for this big game.
Yeah, the weather doesn't matter if you're hitting, and the weather doesn't matter if you're winning. Like they're going to be drawn to winning more than they're drawn to sunny skies. I mean, and also like LSU 6-4, like like it's not a bad time. Alabama could get a third loss at some point. Like it ain't a bad time to be showing off Ohio State, even in a little bit of questionable weather. Like get in while the getting's good.
And Caleb Downs plays a big role in that too. Caleb Downs is a guy that when there's a certain level of football player at Ohio State that becomes the guy that recruits when they get an offer from Ohio State, search Caleb Downs. Let me download a photo and the Ohio State logo just got offered by Ohio State. And it's a picture of Caleb Downs. That is the kind of impact he can have as a guy from Georgia. Like that's how good he is. That's a Malik Hooker. That's a Chase Young, Nick Bosa. Those are what those guys have done. And that's how good Caleb Downs is. You see that from a guy from the South doing that. It's going to have the same similar impact for recruits.
Safeties seem to be buzzing toward Ohio State right now. I mean, you even look at like a guy like Simeon Caldwell, who I believe is related to Tim Walton. And yeah, so, this 2026 safety class in that safety-driven defense from Matt Guerrieri, Tim Walton, and Jim Knowles especially could be a special one. I'll be dialed in on that safety recruitment. Other than that, Mick, I know there's some other defensive guys. Is there anything else you want to touch on? Or I know, was it Xavier Griffith-Haynes, the 4-star North Carolina commit? He's going to be in town?
Yeah, Ohio State was a big-time leader for him on the On3 RPM before he committed to the Tar Heels. I think he kind of wanted to speed up the process a little bit more, so that's why North Carolina kind of went out. Obviously, Mac Brown and the Tar Heels down there it was a rough season to start. I think they've kind of bounced back and kind of have leveled out a little bit, but Ohio State's pushing there. He visited Georgia as well. Like, this is not the end of his recruitment despite his commitment to North Carolina, and he's somebody that Ohio State likes a lot. I think he's kind of a developmental guy. Honestly, he has a lot of similar traits to what Zaire Mathis had in 25. Really long, kind of raw as a pass rusher, but he can have an impact. The other really big defensive guy that's not a defensive back that we should probably talk about is Sincere Johnson, who tweeted out on Tuesday night that he's going to be back, the Cleveland Glenville guy, probably the next guy in the Glenville pipeline. Obviously, I don't expect any kind of early decision from him. He's visited Penn State for the whiteout game. He visited Notre Dame as well. We know how kind of these Glenville recruitments go. Ted Ginn Sr. is going to have them kind of going down the line, waiting out. But I think Ohio State's in a really good spot there with James Laurinaitis. And finally, the third guy that I want to mention, Spencer, I always love telling you about my kickers. Jonathan Hewitt out of Eaton, Ohio. He's the number 3 kicker in the country at close kicking. This is the second game visit this season. I think there's a legitimate chance next offseason that he could push for a full scholarship offer in the 26 class. And so I think they're doing a lot of groundwork to make sure they understand him mentally. They understand the family side of things if you're going to take a high school kicker like that. But yeah, those are the 3 big guys. Simeon Caldwell, guy you mentioned earlier, he will be in town for the Michigan game as well. So that one, again, will be loaded down entirely.
I don't know if there's anybody who could get through that much information in 20 minutes, quite like Mick Walker. That's a lot to take in. Maybe you'll have to listen to it on 0.5 speed to be able to write everything down and check the boxes of who all is going to be here. The full visitors list, which we kind of went through, but there's a lot of receivers visiting that we didn't really touch on. But you know what? That's okay. Brian Hartline's going to do his thing, man. Like, if there's one thing that you can trust, it's that you're going to die, you're going to get taxed, and Brian Hartline's going to get some good receivers. I don't know what else to tell you. So, sitting here for 10 minutes discussing which receivers are visiting, just go to lettermenrow.com and you can get the full visitors list, all the receivers that are there. The player names are all linked, so you can go to their profile, see which one of them are from where else they visited. Mick is doing a great job breaking down that visitors list. I think he's going to have another one at some point this week. And then Saturday, we'll have that confirmed visitors list of the guys who actually did make the trip. So don't go anywhere. Just go to lettermenrow.com, stay on the Lettermen Row YouTube channel, and you'll find all of that out. That is Mick Walker, the main man himself on the other side of that screen. I'm just Spencer Holbrook. Maybe we'll try to get Steve Wolf on next week, talk to him a little bit about the Bucks when they play Michigan. For now, they're just going to take on Indiana in a top 5 matchup, the third top 5 matchup of the year. Finally, Ohio State gets to host one. Lettermen Row will be there every step of the way from both the team angle and the recruiting angle. Go to lettermenrow.com right now. $1 for your first 7 days. After that, it's 50% off for a full year. That gets you basically all the way up to next year's Michigan game. I don't know if there's a better deal in the market right now. So go to lettermenrow.com right now. Like the video below. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll see you guys back here next week for another breakdown of the Buckeyes on the recruiting trail. And we'll see you guys over at lettermenrow.com.